All right, so I'm Laureen Cantwell. I'm an assistant professor as well as an instructional services librarian at the University of Memphis here in Memphis, Tennessee in the U.S. We're going to be talking about what teachers can learn as students in MOOCs. I think it's a really interesting topic myself. It's one of the reasons why I decided to present on it, and hopefully you guys agree. So before we get too deep into things, we'll go ahead and thank the conference sponsors and supporters. Those are the big ones right there, but it's important to realize who's behind making all this happen for free and 24 hours a day. So I'm going to let the whiteboard be active for you guys right now. And what you'll want to do is select the little compass star-looking icon. It's the second one down on that little list. And just mark whereabouts you are. We'll get a sense of how late or early it is, too. If anyone feels like sharing in the chat box what time it is where they are, I think that might be pretty fun, too. 5 a.m. in Bulgaria. I feel pretty important right now. Not much, but I think a flight might get me up that early. Mississippi, you're a neighbor. Just 2 hours south. Yeah, that seems about right. All right. Well, I think we've got just about everybody up on there now. If anyone's having trouble using it or anything like that, feel free to let us know if that's the issue. And I'm just going to go ahead and move along to the next slide now. Thanks so much for giving me the timestamp on your day. All right, so what teachers can learn as students in MOOC. First of all, what in the world is a MOOC? And some of you may have had to Google that before joining the session or in the process of deciding whether you want to join or not, and some of you may know exactly what it is. And certainly if you do Google it, you will come up with a wealth of resources. I haven't done the Google search, so I can't tell you how many billions of results you get, but I'm certain it's a pretty decent-sized number at this point. But basically, MOOC stands for a massive open online course. And so how did I get interested in MOOC? And before you ask, that's not actually a picture of me as a child. That is just clip art. But not too far from what I looked like as a kid. But I've always really had an interest in learning, and I'm really curious about things, and that does tend to be a quality among librarians. And I was fascinated with the question of what a MOOC might hold that my undergraduate education at a small liberal arts college did or didn't hold, and what MOOCs might hold for me that my online education for my master's degree did or did not. Because certainly it's different if I'm not getting credit or I'm not paying for it or taking out loans for it, as the case may be. And now I'm at an institution that has both online and in-person degree programs, and I figured I should understand not only how others might conduct an e-learning experience, but also what draws students into these courses as opposed to or in addition to their other online or their other educational pursuits. So just to make it really clear, I'm not an expert at MOOCs. I'm not teaching one currently. but I am an instructional services librarian. I'm a volunteer researcher and interviewer for project information literacy, and I really just, as I said, love learning. So I started taking them out of curiosity. Schedules and jobs made it complicated to impossible to complete one before the courses I actually started taking this fall, when I could regulate my life a little bit better since I finished job searching. And I chose a 5-week, a 4-week, and a 7-week course. So I'm taking 3 courses right now, and they're all on public health issues. The school name was part of it. They're all through Johns Hopkins. I'm planning to pursue a second master's in public health starting January 2013, so I thought this might be fun and low commitment, no cost way of jump-starting that and gaining some exposure to the topic. So enough about me. Who hosts the MOOCs? So what's great about the concept of global education is that even if you don't actively take, let alone complete, you have my sympathies in trying to actually add work into your week. A course through one of these sites, we'll talk about a few of the folks who host MOOCs over the next several slides. When you're determining which platform may be right for you to try out or recommend to others, I thought it might be good to know about their missions, their founders, and their funders. So that's what we'll touch on next. So the main takeaway from this slide here is that the who of who's founded MOOCs is people, really. You know, it's you know, someone in this room right now could be the next person who funds a MOOC platform. People found them, and for all sorts of reasons. They're either a business of some sort, whether for profit or nonprofit. They have mission statements, and you know, they were started for a reason, just like anything else. So Coursera's, well, half of Coursera's founders is Daphne Koller. And that statement there, I think, is interesting in that it's just her just talking freely about the reasons why she wanted to start this product. And I love the statement that education should be a right, not a privilege, and I believe Coursera is a way to make that happen. And so she's taking her background in computer science and in academia and trying to bring that into the real world and the global sphere. So she saw a need and decided to be part of this solution. And that quote is from the About page on Coursera, where you can find information about the people who are on their staff. Next up is a VP of Marketing from Udemy, which is another platform. They offer both free and fee-based courses, and they recently released the earnings of instructors for their top 10 courses in an article called A New Way to Make 6 Figures on the Web. And it really indicates how successful Udemy has become as a platform. And if that's not enough, they actually take a 30% cut of the fee-based classes, and some of which may charge up to $250 for tuition, which is $75 to Udemy from each person enrolled. So, you know, who besides myself is now thinking, you know, is this a viable way to supplement our income? And if you're interested and you want to email me, you know, after the presentation or anything, I can always send over my slides, and I've got lots of notes, and that has all the citations and links to the articles I'm bringing up. Next up is Khan Academy's Salman Khan, who is the founder. And I thought this quote might be particularly of interest to the crowd here, where he gets at one of the main factors in, I think, the successfulness as well as within the struggles for education right now, which is getting students to want to learn, to value education not just as a necessity in today's world, but as an investment they need to keep making and prioritizing throughout their life. We can become models in our community, however large or small that community may be, and our actions encourage others to see that an education doesn't begin or end with a particular age or whether you get a student loan or a scholarship. And I thought that you know, the emotion and how tangibly invested he is in the potential for his product and for these types of products was really important. So who funds MOOCs? Coursera is funded by several really prominent technology investors. Both of them, or at least, I'm sorry, one of them has a track record with Google, Amazon.com. These are big names. The other made the number 5 spot on Forbes' Midas list of the top 100 most successful technology investors. So they've got some, you know, some pretty powerful guns financially behind their product. edX has the combined prowess of Harvard, MIT, and UC Berkeley, and I believe about $60 million in funding just to launch the platform. And then you take a look at places like Udacity, which has received funding from venture capital firms. And I thought it was interesting that venture capitalists are behind some of these platforms, and I thought, well, what are they looking for? Because about 8 out of 4,000 venture-funded startups deliver about 80% of the venture capital returns. So the chances of you having a tremendously successful product are really against you. So they really seek out game-changing startups that can deliver huge returns, because they know that a small number are going to deliver the vast majority of the returns. They're looking for risk-taking, for authenticity, for really narrow profiles in terms of characteristics from the leadership within the organization, you know, people who have entrepreneurial skills, passion, a balanced ego, that kind of stuff, as well as objectivity. They also feel that a company's success can be predicted by their first 10 to 12 hires. So it really can be important to look at their About Us page, because these organizations are still young, they're still building their staff, and when you see the kinds of backgrounds that their team has, you might actually, you know, understand, you know, the intellectual and business-minded drive behind these products. And after all that, you still might be asking, well, why would you ever take one? So these were some of the primary points I came up with, and you all might have others that you want to add, because again, it's, you know, I'm one instructor who is also just one student within a large, you know, global classroom, and 3 of them to boot. So what do they have to offer? I thought that, you know, you're really participating in the development of a platform and a means of education. And I think that's something that in our day-to-day lives, you know, how much opportunity do we have to do that, where we can really share in that experience at the ground floor level. And I think that is really important. You're engaging with field experts, you're able to gain knowledge, you are, you know, deciding how much you want to interact, how rigorous you would like the experience to be, and you're forging your own path with the education that you're receiving. And I did think it's interesting, the certificates or statements of completion that you may get. I have a few classes right now where one professor may say students who earn 70 points or more will be considered successful and will receive a printable statement of completion. But I have another one where it says you must complete all 12 quizzes with a score of 80% or better to successfully complete this class. But you do have multiple opportunities to take the quiz. What I like about that is that actually in order to get the statement of completion, they're actually looking for, the first one's looking for really a C or better, and the second one's looking for a B or better. You know, for most of us, kind of the way we look at student performance and scores and how it would fall on a letter scale. And in that sense, you know, you can't graduate with a, you know, with a D average. You can't, you know, you can't get by with the lower level grades. You actually have to aim for a higher level of accomplishment within the class. Now, these are just two examples, and so there may be many other examples where it's less rigorous. But these are the classes that I'm in, and so those were the examples I decided to use. edX does offer certificates. When you sign up on their site, they actually ask for a username as well as your full name, and they say that the full name is for your certificate. So in a sense, it's a little bit more like registering as a real student than you might think. So they've got all that ready to go, hoping or perhaps assuming that you're there because these are courses that you want to take and you want to complete. So they may have a higher level of demand for the rigor that they intend to put in the course, and the people who take the class may be looking for a certain level of rigor that some of these other sites may not. I also think it's interesting that you know, people will talk about, and we'll get into kind of the negatives of MOOCs in a little bit, but people will talk about the level of attrition that these kinds of classes have, that they may have a high dropout rate or a high failure rate. And so I actually think that as someone who has, you know, previously taken charge of their education and had to manage all that, I might actually look at a class and say, okay, well, I know December is going to be a really rough month, or you know, mid-November I've got to present at a conference, so maybe this isn't a great time to try to push a 4-week class where so much is crammed into such a short amount of time. And so, you know, is the course something that you can realistically complete? That's something that we don't necessarily have the flexibility to decide in our average college atmosphere. So, you know, if you have to sign up for 12 credit hours that semester, that's what you've got to do, and that's all you have. That's all you have to decide is which classes at that point. But with this, you know, you can sit there and say, you know, hopefully they offer it again because I'd really like to take it. This is just not a good month for me. But if you know it's a topic you're really, really interested in, or it's going to count as professional development, or like in my case, helping prepare for a looming graduate program, you can just, you know, go ahead and do your best. That's all anyone can ask, right? You know, you're fairly anonymous, so just do your best. And much like in a real classroom, you can only encourage people to, you know, to talk so much, and that's where we get into the level of interactivity. It's not heavily monitored, so I don't tend to spend a lot of time on the discussion boards because I don't tend to have a lot of time to spend on the discussion boards. But if I wanted to, I could. I know where they are. But I do the quizzes. I do the assignments. If I get a question wrong and I have an opportunity to see an explanation, I look at it. And I think that's really exciting. And that line where I talk about the preparation for adult learners, those going back to school after a hiatus, those looking for a jump start, for those of you who are in education where you see students trying to adjust to a course management system such as Blackboard, but including many others, Sakai and so forth. Adult learners aren't used to doing that. People who've been out of school even 2 to 5 years aren't used to doing that. And so these kinds of courses with the discussion boards, with the online quiz taking, with the assignments, with the interaction with peers, video lectures, that kind of stuff, it actually will help people, I think, adjust to technology prior to going back to a more rigorous or traditionally academic setting, but which now has this online component that most students are grappling with. So these next few slides are kind of talking more about, why you might want to take a MOOC and what's really interesting and helping them become so popular. So these I actually kind of chopped up an actual infographic, which again is part of my slide notes as a link, so please just let me know if you'd like a copy of this at the end and I'll send it over. But technology improves and evolves over time. There are prohibitive costs of higher education institutions here in the U.S., and certainly I want people everywhere in the world to be able to get an education. So if cost is an issue, there are ways where you can be driven and manage the cost. And building and developing your skill set, I think, is really powerful, and we'll talk about that more as these next few slides go on. And so, if you're the curious type, why not see for yourself? Clearly, there must be some good behind them. They can't be all shine and no substance. There's something there that's driving people to get into that, so why not see for yourself? And Renee, I see your question. It really depends on the platform. From what I've seen, edX is science technology, sure. And I think Udemy tends to excel in the science and technology, but they also had a course on the history of Brazil, for example, and that was taught by a faculty member, maybe at Vanderbilt, something like that. So there are different kinds of faculty in there too. Coursera, which is the one that I tend to use because I like the way that they present materials. I'm taking 3 public health classes, but I've seen them for modern poetry. I've seen them for history, civil rights movement, all that sort of stuff. So I would just sort of explore the sites and see what they have to offer, depending on what you're interested in or what really drives your curiosity. And so these are just some screenshots. You can actually take a look at how things appear within the setting. So that back slide where it says curriculum and overview in part 1, you see that's Udemy, and you'll see the length of the lectures there. They are just video lectures, and I believe it only went on for about 4 weeks. So while there are many lectures posted, there are mainly 4 sections to it. And then the Coursera slides will show you there's the one that says welcome to vaccine trials, and that one does not state times for the lecture. The one below it does, and those are for, I think, Principles of Obesity Economics, I think is the class I'm taking for that bottom image there, and that does show the length of time. I like to see that. I may have 20 or 30 minutes to spare if I wind up early in the morning. I may only have, an hour or 2 at night. So if I'm up early in the morning and I want to tackle some things, I can do it when I know how long the lecture is ahead of time. I feel a little bit more secure planning around that. That may be the reverse for some of you. Maybe you're not night owls like me and you're a morning person. For those of you in Bulgaria at 5 in the morning, maybe you want to take on this work then. I also had a library science faculty member once post recorded sessions of her actual on-the-ground courses. The audio was pretty poor, and I felt a bit like a voyeur throughout the lecture. They were, you know, an hour, hour and a half long. I rarely single task that long. You know, I will rarely have headphones on and be able to spare 90 minutes to dedicate to a lecture and feel like I got everything out of it that I meant to. And granted, that's a me problem. I'm not a single tasker. But at the same time, had that been broken out into sections rather than just recording a lecture she was already giving to other people, that it may have felt more more inclusive to me, as well as more manageable in terms of the content. The lectures in Coursera often, but not always, have questions built into them. If you're someone who tends to be shy in class, this is a great way to test your absorption of the material, right? Because no one can see you. You can click the same wrong answer a million different times. No one can see you. And I think that's a really nice thing for people who aren't used to the classroom, or who are shy, or who are actually really trying to absorb material. And as I noted earlier, there are times when incorrect as well as correct answers will feature explanations. So you can get a little bit more dialogue as if the faculty members were responding to you raising your hand and answering the question. I might argue that courses could have more of these in the lectures themselves, and that they could more consistently supply explanations. But that's because I learn from what I get right, I learn from what I get wrong, and you know, it's a new product. It's going to evolve, as I said, with, you know, it's just the nature of technology. So things are going to keep adjusting over time. As a librarian, of course I like that there's an online library. Even if it's less about scholarly articles and doesn't have the resources of a top research university or a top liberal arts college behind the link for the online library, it gets the word in the student's mind as a place to go for information to support their research, the lectures, their discussion, and the assignments. And that's good with me. So these are just a few examples of what, say, a discussion board might look like. And so each of those blue links for the student introductions, you'd be able to click and post if you want. It tells you, you know, how many posts are on it, how many views there are, so you can get a sense of hot topics, which I think aids in some efficiency. It's also searchable, which I think is great. The instructor bios, you can see how well prepared your faculty members are to teach you. How long have they been in the business? What are their degrees in? How do you know what degrees you should pursue if you want to do the same kind of work that they do? That kind of stuff. So really useful for students. Let's take a look at this. I think this is where things start getting kind of juicy with MOOCs. There are, the top image there is about the forum threads and some of the rules, basically, for conduct on the site. You can report inappropriate conduct as well as use flags to draw attention to possible issues with the platform itself. So there is a system for reporting issues. I think they're still working out the kinks there. Is basically what I've been hearing and looking around the web on how people are getting responses or not. There's no principal's office, there's no detention, you know, it's not a physical place. So there's limited control when you have 10,000 students in one class and you may have 30 classes going on concurrently. You know, it's not easy to to monitor all of that when you have a small startup business team. So I'm sympathetic to what they're dealing with, and if I'm not sure how well you can see this, but if you're looking at the lower Coursera image, where you can see sort of a discussion board post set on the screen, I chose a random discussion board thread to look at, and from what I can tell of the content, which begins with the user posting a link and a little conversation starting text about a fat tax in the Copenhagen Post, it's on topic, it's international in scope, it's intelligent. They're talking about policy flaws and the fact that when you're close to another location where the tax doesn't exist, you might just go there for the things that you need instead, say along the US and Canadian border or Denmark to Germany, that kind of thing. And I think, you know, for the most part, when you look at the Udemy link, you can see it's attached to different lectures. You can get a sense of what the discussion is leading into it, but sadly, you can also note how many answers there have been. And for two of those, which are really, you know, non-technology related and actually content related, there's not much going on there, which is a little bit disappointing. All right, and then here you can see with edX, which is all the way over on the left, what the course number is. It's a computer science class. When do classes start? When do they end? How much effort is going to be involved for you as a student? I think that's really useful. It's something that you don't always see in, you know, your average syllabus, and maybe that's a takeaway for teachers, is talking about, you know, how much, what's the time commitment here? And is that something that's used to scare students off or to show them, you know, how serious the class is? I don't know. As well as whether there are prerequisites. And then Udacity, which is one of the ones I mentioned earlier that does have a pretty heavy technology and computer science slant to it. You can tell from the course titles there that that is in fact the case. Now what is nice is that they do segment it out by beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I actually thought that looking at the estimated effort again, there was a great blog post that I found through don'twasteyourtime.co.uk, and the post is called "Why I Failed a MOOC." And you know, of course, there's going to be plenty of people out there who tell you that it's super easy to pass. You know, you can fool the computer, you can cheat, you can do all this stuff. Okay, fine, and we'll get into that. But what the blogger said was the MOOC was something I wanted to do for myself, but the time frame the MOOC was being run in between August 12th and 18th was very short, which made consistent attendance very difficult at this very busy time of the year for me. Once I realized I missed the first day, I was already behind the schedule and would have to work harder to catch up. All of this is down to simply my own expectation of my own performance. I like to do well, I like to do things properly. In a 5-day period, I had set aside the time to attend and engage, but just could not commit when it actually came to it. I have a job to do. And I thought that that's really much more often the circumstances of the people who are taking these classes. So that is a bit about that. There are additional community building tactics that they've used to create a better atmosphere for students. This is an image off of meetup.com showing where there are Coursera communities, how many people are involved. And so you could actually meet people. If you're a Twitter person, if you're a Facebook person, if you like meetup groups, you can actually go ahead and join one of these groups and perhaps meet up with people who are also taking these classes and talk about your experiences and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not quite as removed from the real world depending on how you like to go about things. 29% of teachers use social media for coursework, and that's 80% for college professors. So it is a realistic expectation that some sort of social networking community will be involved within your college education, and so why not gain some exposure to it ahead of time? Renee, I see your question about whether they're totally self-paced or not. I have one class that's about vaccine trials, and that does have weekly lectures and things, and certainly the further you get behind, if you're anything like me and that blogger, you're going to put more and more pressure on yourself to catch up. And that pressure isn't always a fun thing to have. But all the quizzes are due by a certain date, and that's early December or mid-December, something like that. But there are other ones that you do have to take by a certain date, or you may have varying numbers of tries or attempts at the quizzes. So there are some rules involved to the scheduling, but it's not like this is due Tuesday, classes of the week start Monday. It's not quite such a syllabus. So just to go on, I also thought this was an interesting idea. I think a lot of us have seen the idea of the e-portfolio growing over the last 5 to 10 years for students as well. And so if you are working on a course, even if you're trying to gain experience in technology and you're also, say, taking something in public health, you could take that and actually try to play around on a blog or a wiki and make one for yourself, have your resume on it, have some information about your professional goals, and then actually have some course discussion there, or have some essays that you write. You can be self-guided and working on your professional profile development and management as you're doing these classes. So what are the downsides to learning in a MOOC? And we have mentioned some of them, and I don't want to belabor these points too much, because when I think of these things, I think of them as areas for improvement, because how long has education been around? It's been around for a really, 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 really long time. So we haven't perfected that yet. Memphis City schools have trouble all the time. And so if we haven't perfected education in person yet, and we've been doing that for, ever, why would we think that MOOCs would be perfected in such a small amount of time? I think that that's an expectation that's too much to put on something that's too young. So these are some of the things that I think people are going to be focusing on developing over time, over the next, say, 1 to 5 years, to really get it into something that is globally accessible. So the closed captioning, the translations, and reorganizing or changing how we facilitate the discussion formats in the discussion forum. There are a lot of good ideas about that out there. I can download a text file with all the transcript for my lectures. There is software that you can use to create translations for the videos. So those things are growing, but as Katie said, as I've been saying, it's a new medium, so we're all just adjusting here. And I think the closed captioning and the translations will get there. That's one area of concern to make it a really viable education option. I agree with it, and I think it's going to get there. I think subtitles, all that sort of stuff. There is a wiki for Coursera which talks about students who are deaf and hard of hearing that need high-quality subtitles. Non-native speakers often prefer subtitles, so they know it's a concern. They know that you all really want to get involved in that. So they do actually allow volunteers to help translate or transcribe, which I think is great too, and I didn't know about that. I think they're probably under-promoting the developments that they have, to be honest. You can also download MP4s of lectures. So, I mean, they do try to make it as transferable from medium to medium as possible to get you things the way you need them in order to do the work in a way that works with your lifestyle. Moving on from there, you know, yeah, the level of rigor is an upside and a downside. You could choose a low level of rigor, and I think that limits the potential benefits. You could be on a deadline and just decide that you want to unenroll from the class because it's too much, which is why I think the self-paced, self-guided, self-determination that's involved in these courses is something that we do all have to own up to. No one's going to hold your hand. You know, no one's going to say your grades are poor, go to detention. You know, there's no report card going home. It's not that kind of atmosphere. Certain pressures aren't there, and yet if you want to succeed, you do have to push yourself. I do want to advocate that there may be a better acronym out there. I haven't found it yet, but somehow the sound MOOC just doesn't necessarily come naturally to me as something that I want to promote. And I also think that you know, the feeling from some in the field saying that it's going to fail or that people are unethical about it, we'll get into that too in the next slide. You know, those are things that you're going to find everywhere. Not every teacher is the best teacher in the school. Not every student is the best student in the school, and that's humanity. And it's just as true in technology as it is in, you know, an elementary school. So again, I think we just need to be practical and a bit forgiving of the software and its developmental stages, because that's exactly what it's still in. So we'll go more into some of these downsides now, just so you can see some examples. So I pulled these from a wiki, or I guess a blog rather. And this just talks about, you know, it's sort of like the Milgram experiment where, you know, when you can't see people, somehow we all just behave in a way that we wouldn't necessarily behave if we were standing right in front of us. And we need to own that too, which is why I definitely wanted to show you guys earlier the examples of the expected conduct for the discussion boards. But these are actual responses. And the one where the numbers 1 through 30 pop up is actually a scenario where someone had to have a maximum of 30 words in response to a peer's submission. And that's what they chose to submit. So not only did they not do them the favor of just saying nothing, you know, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. They didn't even do them the favor of saying nothing. They actually just spent, and that's not even 30 words, it's actually more than 30 words because they didn't hyphenate the numbers. And so, you know, there's a lot of problems with that post, really. But, you know, and then you look at the one towards the top left. My guess is you lived in one of the Carolinas where you neither spoke nor wrote a high quality of English. Well, I know plenty of smart people coming from the Carolinas. And on top of that, you don't know where that person's coming from. You don't know, you know, what kind of life they've had. So why are we automatically jumping to, you know, clearly I know more about you than you know about yourself kind of tones with people. So I think that's something that would impact the way that I talk to students in person, and that's something that would impact the way that I talk to people, you know, over the phone and in online settings and engage on discussion boards. I mean, these are things that impact the way I view my role as a student and and my role as an instructor. And exactly, it's an open system. You run the risk of this. You hope it doesn't happen, but it does, because humans are human, and that's a for better or for worse kind of thing. But the best we can do is try to flag it when it's inappropriate, and hope that the platforms get to a point where they are able to investigate these issues and perhaps determine whether or not this is someone that's legitimately there for an education, or who's there to just say terrible as a response to people or give them a list of numbers instead of actual constructive help. Let's go into, this talks a little bit more about the rules of online conduct, because these places do have some rules behind them, and but it does have the disclaimer that Coursera does not routinely screen or monitor content posted by the users to the site. It doesn't have obligations to do something about it right now. It reserves the right to remove the content. But, you know, what happens to the user who created the content, I don't know. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out over time, because it is something that plenty of people do have a complaint about. But note again earlier in the presentation the kinds of discussion that I've been seeing in the public health classes, and they're all very, very professional. And so I've actually started thinking, well, maybe one thing we could do is create learning communities within the course itself. So if you have undergraduate and graduate students, like active enrolled students in a university as one, if we want to look at, you know, professional students in terms of, you know, have you graduated from somewhere, are you leading a professional life, not currently an enrolled student at an institution. You know, you could play around with that and create environments where maybe there is a group for casual learners, and if they want to mouth off to each other, that's fine, but for people who are there to legitimately learn and who are hoping for legitimate experiences with peer reviewing and so forth, maybe that's one way to accomplish it. But they'll figure that out, and that's something that's just going to have to be played with over time. And I thought this was just interesting. You know, who are we when we participate in MOOC? I mean, I'm a professional, I'm a librarian, I'm a human being, I'm someone who's going to be starting a new program soon. So, you know, think about the fact, you know, you're not really attending the university with whom you have a class, and so you're not entitled to certain things, and keep that in mind, because there is, you know, among the people who complain about it, there can be a note of entitlement as well. You know, this is what I should be getting. I should be getting exactly what I have in my classroom. And, you know, I don't go into elementary school and teach physics, certainly not at the AP level. So, you know, you do have to adjust your expectations, because you're getting certain things out of it, and it's an experience. But it isn't a substitute, it's a supplement, and that's a phrase I've heard passed around a lot of times. Taking a MOOC is not a substitute for, you know, if you want to be a doctor, getting your PhD. It's not a substitute, but it's a supplement, and it's a valid one. So this was an image I thought was interesting. It just kind of really phrases the benefits and the issues of taking a MOOC, and then the factors that are involved in the middle. And that's really what I think the factors is what it really pivots on, quite literally, the structure of the software and the experience that you're trying to get out of it. And that will determine a lot of your experience in them, because you're either being realistic or not. Let's see. I found a few additional posts I thought might be interesting about why teachers are using technology in the classroom. You know, we're helping people adapt, and we're being adaptive. So we're showing flexibility in how we deliver information. We are also, you know, giving them the novelty that most students these days, frankly, crave. I'm 28, I'll disclose that, but I'm technically by birth actually part of the millennial generation. So I too appreciate some novelty in how things are presented to me. I don't have an iPhone 5, I've got the 3, but I still like it for what it does, you know. And having a bit of enhancements going on to the material that's being taught. So those percentages are important, and if that's why technology is being brought into the classroom, that's also why technology is a successful way to deliver education to a world of people. And then that bottom image there talks more about adult learners and what I was saying earlier about how they're struggling to adjust to content management systems, but that the technology, as it says on the post, is a key component of literacy at this point. And being able to take advantage of things like MOOCs to help catch up to what they're going to need to be able to manage when they do re-enroll or matriculate for the first time or start experimenting with local live classes. I think that's a really important component to why these classes find the success that they do. And then perhaps one of my favorite slides is just the fact that, you know, you can really decide if you've been successful. As you've heard me say, as you've heard the bloggers say, you know, if you're a driven person and if you're curious about this, you're either going to put the time in or you won't. And if you're able to put the time in, that's going to be really exciting and interesting to you, and hopefully you can make the most out of it. And that will require you adjusting your expectations, but hopefully you'll find some things that are really interesting and encouraging to you. And if you're not able to put the time in, then you learn a valuable lesson, which is that, you know, you may have to think about, is this something I can take on the fly? What kinds of time devotion is this going to require of me in order to pass the class, in order to feel like I've done a good job? Because at the end of the day, the purpose of a global education is so that people, you know, at the individual level, every person, you know, who is in this room right now, every person who's participating in a MOOC right now has an opportunity to learn. And so if you feel that you learned something from the class, then that to me is a certain kind of success. Maybe you didn't learn much. Maybe you need to take it another 5 times. You can go on ahead and do that. And I think, you know, you being able to judge yourself as successful or not is a really powerful thing to give students. So that is about it for me. I do have some information here about following the development, the trends and discussions about MOOCs and different sites that you can actually see how they're developing themselves that I think are really great. At Shambles Guru, go ahead, put it on your webpage. That would be really exciting for me. So no complaints here. And I guess we have a couple minutes for questions, so feel free to ask them, but my email address is right there, and you can go ahead and email me questions too. The MOOCs that kind of go both ways. I have some questions, I have some classes, Katie, where the MOOCs are graded through automated quizzes primarily, but I do have one that's 4-week long that has both automated quizzes as well as a peer review component. And I'm in the middle of that right now, so I don't know how my peers are treating me yet, but I did complete them. And they were, I guess, maybe 75-word max answers that I had to give, but it's the economics of, principles of obesity economics, and so that's kind of interesting to try to put economic words and think about situations and only have 75 words to do it with as an English major. That's tricky for me. I don't believe the instructors actually sit there and grade, but what I do like is that with the quizzes, after you submit your quiz and you get your first round of scores, because as I said, there are multiple attempts allowed, you could actually sit there and see if there are explanations available for the answers given, and that in a sense is like having a little bit more interaction, because not all quizzes do that, which tells me that that's something that the instructor chooses to do within the platform. That's just kind of what I get out of it if I picture what goes on the back end in terms of setting up a course. And I know we're at our 10 o'clock mark, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to plug them in the chat box, or I really do welcome you guys to get in touch over email. I'd love it. That would make my day tomorrow. But either way, I've really enjoyed presenting tonight, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. It's been a lot of fun. It's been my pleasure. Now you guys can all either go to sleep or go to work. Seems to be a healthy mix of both. Sure, Katie, go ahead. Just shoot me an email. And lunchtime, you can have lunch. That's awesome.